Peace Pilgrim was an amazing woman who was a deep seeker for understanding, for peace, for sharing that insight with others. It took her a while to come to that experience. As a young child, as a girl, she didn't have that many connections with spirituality. I think she probably sensed some spiritual quality in herself, but was growing up in a time when a lot of the energy in the country and in the culture was outwardly directed. She was born in 1908, so this was in the late 20s and 30s, prior to the Second World War. So she liked to dress in fancy clothes. She drove a car. She had a job. She eventually got married, but felt that something was missing from her life. And so probably around the age of 30, she began a period of really deep seeking for a more meaningful and more positive way of being in the world. She said that she knew that making money was easy, but that spending it on frivolous things didn't bring pretty much spending it on almost anything didn't bring happiness. So happiness didn't come from things, and peace didn't come from things. Peace and happiness were internal qualities that we needed to cultivate. So, as I said, about the age of 30, she had a very deep spiritual experience. She was looking deeply to find her way in the world, to find what was important in her life, and she talks about spending a whole night walking in the woods, and then coming to this point where she sort of surrenders her personal will and just wants to be of service to the greater life, the greater community of peace and understanding. So, and then it took 15 years from that experience till she finally felt that she had found inner peace. And there's some place, if you look around, you can find a little diagram that she draws about hills and valleys of feeling a little more connected, and then coming down into a place of not feeling so peaceful, not feeling so connected to life, and then a plateau, and then continuing to move on upwards. So after this time of seeking and eventually finding a lot of inner peace, she was motivated to try to do something for peace, more than just the kind of service work that she'd been doing. And so she had a vision of a pilgrimage, and that pilgrimage began on January 1st of 1953. Previous to that, she talks about having a literal vision where she saw the clothing that she was going to wear, her garb. She saw the path that she was going to walk, sort of overlaid on a map of the country. And she set out without any organizational support, taking a vow to walk until offered shelter and fast until offered food, and that she would not ask. It had to be offered without asking. And so the first pilgrimage in 1953 went from coast to coast and border to border, about 5,000 miles. There's some interesting details to her life that maybe a lot of people, even who connect with the book, aren't aware of. The things that I've, they're assumptions that I make, so I don't know that they're actual fact. But after the first pilgrimage in 1953, the first pilgrimage had it was oriented toward peace, but it also had a lot of sort of activism, sort of peace activism involved. She was carrying petitions, she was getting signatures, she was doing this kind of peace effort. She had peace within herself, but she was still being an activist in a different kind of way in the world. After the first pilgrimage in 1954, she did not walk. She didn't do her pilgrimage in 1954. She did a lot of reflection, a lot of self-reflection. She did some speaking. She fasted for 40 days, did a water fast for 40 days, and connected back up with her family, with some of the friends that she had before she started the pilgrimage. And some of those friends were spiritual friends as well as just being friends. And then I think that sometime in that year, between end of 1953 and the beginning of 1955, she had this feeling that she needed to continue to do the pilgrimage. So 1954 is sort of this transition year where she's not on pilgrimage. She's giving talks. She did a couple of radio talks, I think, and she did this 40-day fast, which I think was an important part of her experience. It was to deepen her spiritual understanding. And of course, there are a number of famous 40-day fasts, one of which is, I think, Jesus's 40 days fast in the wilderness. Yep. And so sometime in this period, in 1954, she decides that the work of this is my understanding, the work of the pilgrimage isn't over. And so January 1st of 1955, she's back in Pasadena for her second pilgrimage, which is to walk 100 miles in every state, and there were only 48 states at the time, 100 miles for another 5,000 miles. So 100 miles in every state, starting somewhere in the state and ending up at the capital. And then 100 miles in Canada and 100 miles in Mexico. So that's the second pilgrimage. It takes about 2 years, from beginning of 1955 to maybe the end of 1957. The interesting thing that I find about that pilgrimage, and the interesting thing that I find about the changes in Peace Pilgrim's tunics over the years, is that when she started the second pilgrimage, the back of the tunic said, "Walking 10,000 miles for world disarmament." Okay, that's kind of it's still a pretty political kind of an understanding. It's wanting to make a political change in the structure of world relations and world politics. And I don't know if she still had petitions or not, but she wore that tunic maybe for the first half of the second pilgrimage, and then there's a change, and the tunic says, "Walking 10,000 miles for world peace." So from disarmament, which is kind of has a lot of again political overtones, to world peace, which is just a much more general idea, and not so pointed in one direction. Once she finished the second pilgrimage, the tunic changes again, because she finished the 10,000 miles, and now the goal, perhaps it's a goal, is walking 25,000 miles on foot for world. Is it walking? Sorry about this. Yeah, it's walking 20. So she hadn't walked the 25,000 miles yet. So it's walking 25,000 miles on foot for world peace, because 25,000. She's aiming at 25,000 miles, and so it takes her until 1964 to walk the 25,000 miles, and then the tunic changes again, and the tunic says 25,000 miles on foot for world peace, because she already walked the 25,000 miles, so it's just she's already done it. And then what she said is that it freed her up, because she was kind of very systematic in the way she walked, and so she counted miles. She used the kind of highway maps that you could get in a gas station before digital maps were available. And if you remember those maps, which I am old enough to remember, that on the main roads they would have mileage between the cities, not on the secondary roads, but on the main roads there would be mileage. So if you were walking from Oklahoma City to Tulsa, and there was a road that went between the two, you would know how many miles it was from Oklahoma City to Tulsa. That's the way she kept track of how many miles she walked. Once whether she wrote it down, whether she kept it all in her head, I have no idea how she kept track of the miles, but she counted very meticulously, to the point of, she tells stories about being picked up on the side of the road and taken in for questioning, and then asking the police to take her back. She would put a little rock my understanding. She put a little rock on the side of the road, and she would have the police drive her back and find the rock that she left on the side of the road so that she wouldn't miss any miles as she walked. So after 25,000, she would say that she was free to walk anywhere. She didn't have to count miles anymore. So instead of staying on the main road, she could walk on minor roads and paths, and she could walk wherever she wanted without having to count miles anymore. My understanding is that she visited every town in the United States with a population of 10,000 or more. And if you go back to the 60s and 70s and 80s, there weren't as many towns that were under 10,000 as there weren't as many with over 10,000 as there are today. Okay, so the next interesting change in the message on the tunic came in 1972. And this is the tunic. So it was 25,000 miles on foot for world peace from 1964 to 1972. My feeling is, totally my feeling is that suddenly world peace was too small a concept for her. That to think about just peace in the world was not big enough for peace. That it had to be 25,000 miles on foot for peace, with no container. That the peace that she was experiencing and the peace that she wanted to share was a peace that could not be contained, even in the world. And so from 72 to 81, the message was 25,000 miles on foot for peace. And that's all she needed to say. It didn't need to be qualified in any way. And so that's what I can tell you about Peace Pilgrim. She died in a car accident in 1981 outside of Knox, Indiana. And the interesting thing is, in terms of Friends of Peace Pilgrim, which formed almost immediately by 1982, the book was being written in her own words, and in January 1st of 1983, the first books were delivered. So like 18 months after Peace Pilgrim died, the book Peace Pilgrim, Her Life and Work in Her Own Words was published and available. And so many more people have been reached through the book and through the Steps Toward Inner Peace booklet than Peace Pilgrim, as she was walking, could ever reach. I mean, and she was a master of being connected to the media. She would reach out to newspaper editors and writers, and she would contact television stations and radio. I'm coming to town. Do you want to interview me? She really knew how to promote herself in a wonderful way. But as many people as she reached, which was probably, in the many hundreds of thousands or maybe even the millions through social media, although many of those were through television, many of those were just, very short encounters. She was on Johnny Carson, she was on Merv Griffin, she was on Joe Pine. This is a guy that was very acerbic and would ask people really hard questions and sort of taunt them. So she did do some national television programs. But Friends of Peace Pilgrim has allowed her message to go all over the world, to reach literally millions of people. We've given away 2 million steps booklets